Here I am back in the garage with the Golf again. Last time, I dropped the fuel tank to repair a rusted brake line, and I also fixed a leaking fuel quick disconnect. Today, I'm going to mount the fuel tank and try and button everything else back up. I have various brake lines, bump stops, and springs to install, and that should be it. Hopefully today is just assembly. So let's get to it. Here, I'm reinstalling the fuel tank. It is a bit cumbersome to lift it and get everything lined back up again. But once I did, I found it easiest to start on the driver's side and bolt that up before coming over to the filler neck assembly and bolting that up. That made it easier to position the straps and secure them to the car. Once the fuel tank is back in position, there are some fuel lines that need to be reconnected that are just in front of the passenger side wheel well. After that, the fuel tank is done. So this is the soft brake line that I haven't replaced yet. It does not look as rusted as the other one, so I'm hoping I don't have the same issues. But since I have a new one, and this is a good time to replace it, let's see if we have luck. Okay, yeah, this one's not giving us any issues. Yeah, good boy. Now it's time to replace these degrading bump stops. It should be pretty straightforward. Pop this cap off. And you got to remove this nut. To do that, I'm going to grab up here with some vice grips and go at it. There you go. To replace the bump stop, I slid the old one off, positioned the new one into the shock sleeve, and reassembled it. The secondary purpose of the bump stop in these cars is to keep the sleeve in position. This helps protect the shock. And then you just mount it to the car. After I installed the inner fender liner, I was ready to move on to the brake lines. I got new ABS sensors for both sides, so I'm going to put those on. All right, do the same thing on the other side. Now I'm going to put the rotor back on. And now the caliper. So here's the new brake line that I picked up from Advanced Auto. It's crazy how it has that bend, but it matches. So I'm gonna swap it out. Brand new, brand new, brand new. Do, 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 do. If you watched one of my old videos, there were some clips here that hold the brake line to the rear axle. I broke them, but they're cheap, so I bought a whole bunch more to replace them. All right, that looks like it fits pretty good. I got a new set for this side, but this setup's a little different. The soft line is not already connected to the hard line. I think this was a set from O'Reilly's, but I'm gonna put it on as well. Now I gotta make sure I get this right. It's a little off, but I can persuade it to get on there. All right, that does it for that. Now that everything is connected back to the rear axle, I'm gonna slide it under the car and mount it. Here we go. Getting the rear axle beam back in did take some trial and error. After wrestling with it for a while, I settled on connecting the shocks first and then using a jack on each side to reposition the bushing so that I could get the bolt through. If I do this again, I'll be able to do it in half the time. Now that the rear axle is back in, I can mount this soft brake line to the bracket and screw the hard brake line into it. Now, the new brake lines get to meet each other. All right, now I'm gonna go to the other side. And this is the driver's side. There's not a lot of room to work in here. All right, so that makes all the brake lines connected. Now I am going to tighten down where the bushing goes, and I really think the only thing left will be the springs. You know, I could have gotten up and gotten the ratcheting wrench, but I was already comfortable up under the car, so I made this one work. All right, next up, hooking up the parking brake and knocking out the springs. Reinstalling OEM height springs can be difficult, but what I did was use a wrench in the end of a jack handle to pry down using the strut bolt to give myself enough leverage. It took some convincing, but I was finally able to get it in. I was almost done. I was on the home stretch. I had the car all buttoned up. I bled the brakes, but when I tried to start the car, this happened. Bad news. I had the car back together, I started it, and the fuel was leaking. So I went to the one thing that I was worried about, the fuel line fitting. I replaced the O-ring, but there might not have been anything wrong with the O-ring. I had my wife get in and turn the key to start the fuel pump, and it was leaking from this guy. So I took it off to inspect the tube, and it came off with very little finger pressure. So I'm assuming that either I broke it, or this was the reason they had all that RTV sealant on there, was that this was already cracked. So I have more parts to order. I ordered this from ECS Tuning. Here it is. I got the whole setup. It comes with the new gasket, new pump, and new pump housing. So let's take the old one out. Finally, it's back on the ground. I will call it a win after all that work if I back out of the driveway and the rear doesn't squeak and moan. Let's see how it goes. Listen carefully. Silence. Wonderful. So, I will call that a success. It's been a long work week for me, but I've driven this twice this week, 2 days back to back, so that's over 100 miles. No fuel leaks, no brake line leaks. Everything looks good. It handles a lot better, and it doesn't make any noise. So, on to the next thing. This was a more involved job than I anticipated, but thanks for riding with me. If you want to see more of how I handle problems and modify my 99 Golf, my 95 Civic, or my 1989 Chevrolet pickup, hit subscribe.